Welcome back to Healing Through Thoughts, Overthinking Series 2. Monday's video looked at the neuroscience of why your brain won't switch off. Today we go into the dynamic between overthinking and anxiety, because they're not the same thing, but they are very much in a relationship. A complicated, mutually enabling relationship that neither of them is in a hurry to leave. If you've ever noticed that worrying makes you more anxious, and being more anxious makes you worry more, and the whole thing spirals until you genuinely cannot remember what you were originally even worried about, that's what we're unpacking today. It has a name, it has a mechanism, and importantly, it has an exit. Anxiety and overthinking are frequently conflated, but they're distinct, and telling them apart matters for how you respond to each. Anxiety is primarily a physiological experience: elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, muscle tension, a sense of dread. It is the body's stress response in motion. Overthinking is primarily a cognitive experience: the looping, ruminative thinking that circles problems without resolving them. The two commonly occur together, and each amplifies the other, but they can also exist independently. You can be physiologically anxious without a specific worry, generalized anxiety, and you can overthink without feeling acutely anxious, analytical rumination. Understanding which is driving your experience in a given moment helps you choose the right response. Physical regulation for anxiety, cognitive tools for overthinking. The most well-documented direction of the loop is overthinking generating anxiety. When you ruminate, when you revisit the same worry repeatedly, you are effectively re-exposing your amygdala to the threat signal each time. Imagine telling someone a frightening story, then telling it again 5 minutes later, then again. Each retelling reactivates the fear response. Rumination does the same thing. Each loop of "what if this goes wrong" is another exposure to the imagined threat, another cortisol spike, another round of physiological activation. This is why chronic overthinking is strongly correlated with anxiety disorders, not just as a symptom, but as a maintenance mechanism. You're not just worrying because you're anxious. The worrying is keeping the anxiety alive. The loop runs the other way too. When you're physiologically anxious, when the body is in threat response mode, the amygdala scans more aggressively for danger, and the prefrontal cortex responds by generating more explanatory and anticipatory thinking. In simple terms, feeling anxious makes your brain look harder for things to be anxious about, and it tends to find them, or if it can't find real ones, it generates hypothetical ones. This is particularly evident in the morning. Cortisol rises naturally in the first 30 to 45 minutes of waking, a physiological spike that in an anxious nervous system reads as morning dread before a single conscious thought has been formed. The body is already in mild threat mode. The mind then obliges by finding content to match. Subscribe to Healing Through Thoughts. Monday's long form on the neuroscience of the loop is on the channel now, and Friday's practical toolkit is coming. One of the least discussed drivers of the anxiety-overthinking loop is safety behavior. The things we do to manage anxiety in the short term that inadvertently maintain it in the long term. Safety behaviors include seeking reassurance. "Is this okay?" asked repeatedly, avoiding situations that provoke anxiety, checking doors, messages, symptoms, and crucially, overthinking itself. Each time you run the worry loop, there's a subtle expectation that this time the thinking will resolve something, bring certainty, make it safe to stop. Occasionally it does, temporarily, and that intermittent relief is enough to reinforce the behavior. Cognitive behavioral therapy identifies safety behaviors as central to the maintenance of anxiety disorders, precisely because they prevent the brain from updating its threat model. You never get to discover that the feared thing doesn't materialize because you're always managing against it. At the root of the anxiety-overthinking loop, in almost every case, is intolerance of uncertainty. The nervous system's tendency to treat "I don't know" as equivalent to "something bad is happening." People with high intolerance of uncertainty respond to ambiguous situations with more anxiety, more rumination, and more avoidance than those who can hold not knowing more comfortably. Critically, they don't have more to worry about. Their lives are not objectively worse. They simply respond more intensely to the uncertainty that is present in every life. The research is clear that intolerance of uncertainty is a transdiagnostic factor. It underlies generalized anxiety, health anxiety, social anxiety, OCD, and depression. Reducing it, through deliberate, graduated exposure to unresolved uncertainty, is one of the most effective long-term interventions available. The anxiety-overthinking loop is self-reinforcing, but it has weak points, places where it can be interrupted. Physical regulation first. Because the loop has a physiological component, purely cognitive approaches have limited effect when the body is highly activated. Slow breathing, specifically extending the exhale, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and reduces the amygdala's alarm state. This is not a metaphor. It is a measurable physiological effect that occurs within 2 to 3 minutes of sustained, slow breathing. The body calms down. The thinking has less fuel. Cognitive diffusion second, creating distance between yourself and your thoughts. I notice I'm having the thought that reduces the thought's authority without suppressing them. You're not fighting the thought, you're changing your relationship to it. Behavioral experiments third, testing the feared outcome in real life, approaching rather than avoiding, gives the brain the evidence it needs to update its threat model. Nothing convinces the amygdala like direct experience. The anxiety-overthinking loop is not a life sentence. It is a pattern, learned, maintained by specific mechanisms, and interruptible at multiple points. The most important shift is this: stop treating anxiety as a problem to be eliminated, and start treating it as a signal to be understood. The signal is almost always some version of, "I feel uncertain and I don't like it." Respond to that with regulation, with presence, with honest acknowledgement, rather than trying to think your way to certainty that isn't available. Friday's video on this channel is the practical toolkit: grounding techniques, scheduled worry time, cognitive diffusion, uncertainty exposure, and how to put them together into something sustainable. This week's daily shorts cover each specific form of the loop: the 3 a.m. spiral, the conversation replay, the what-ifs, and more. They're all on the channel. Thank you for watching Healing Through Thoughts. See you Friday.